You're single. You don't need a whole place. My sister wanted my home for her family. I refused. She called me selfish and ended up drowning in bills. I am the older brother, 29, and my younger sister, who is now 27, has always been the golden kid. Allow me to take you through the entire narrative from the beginning. Here's the thing. My parents had me while they were still sorting out their professions. 3 years later, my sister was born. It was evident from the start who was the favored. My parents were polite to me, but once my sister arrived, everything seemed to revolve around her. People noticed it too. Relatives would comment on how much attention she received, but my parents would simply laugh it off. As children, the preference was clear. My birthdays were tiny, with homemade cake, whereas my sisters had booked locations and large guest lists. When I asked why, my father responded, "You're older now. I was 8, she was 6, toys were the same. I saved months for a skateboard." She mentioned wanting a bike and got one by the weekend. My mother's explanation was always, "She's younger, let her enjoy it." School also made it plain. I received high marks and quickly found a nice job. My sister brought home average work or a painting and put it on the fridge. I took second place in a science fair. My father did not attend since he had work. She had a single line in a school play, and both parents left work early to attend. My mom's excuse is that she gets nervous. She requires support. I was a good kid who remained out of trouble, did well in school, and helped at home. But my parents pretended that I didn't require attention. I was fine, although my sister was always the special one, or baby. I was continually told, "You're older, you should understand," or "She's younger, let her have it," as if my sole responsibility was to support her. By middle school, the pattern had mostly been established. My sister was at the heart of everything. I was only there to help out and not complicate matters. At that age, you begin to notice the little things more, and there were plenty. In 7th school, I wanted to participate in a scientific competition and build a little solar-powered car, but there was a cost and supplies required. When I requested at dinner, my father said it was too expensive, and my mother said I should forgo it. A week later, my sister registered for a dancing camp that cost twice as much, and they paid without hesitation. I ended up constructing a basic version out of scraps in my garage. I couldn't compete, but my teacher was impressed that I tried. That's when I realized that if I wanted something, I had to do it myself. However, home life was about more than just money. It was how they treated us. If my sister made a mess, I was expected to clean it. If something went missing, it was presumed that I was responsible. She once left an open juice box on the couch, which discolored the fabric. My mother called me from my room and urged me to tidy things up. I said it wasn't me. She commented, "I know, but she's tired. Just do it." That was natural. She also had a propensity of talking back. She would quarrel, roll her eyes, and slam the doors. My parents dubbed it attitude. If I did something like that, it was considered disrespectful, and I'd lose privileges. There were occasions when my father would take me aside and say things like, "She's your little sister. You have to keep the peace. Don't provoke her." It didn't matter who started it. It was always up to me to smooth things out. At school, I began to notice how my life differed from that of some of my friends. My friend's parents attended his basketball games, assisted with projects, and inquired about his academic progress. At our house, most talks with me were orders. Take out the trash. Help your sister with her homework. Do not stay out too late. My sister was continually asking questions and giving praise. How was your day? What would you want for dinner? You did exceptionally well. By the age of 16, I had ceased expecting anything from my parents and instead focused on myself. I cut lawns, took odd jobs, saved money, and bought my own belongings. My sister still got everything handed to her, and she even quipped, "I'm the favorite." My parents smiled. I kept quiet, knowing that speaking up wouldn't change anything. By the time high school began, I had ceased asking for things. I rarely went on school field excursions, since I knew the answer would be no. The class once traveled to a science facility outside of town, which cost about $30. I did not even bring it up. I used to believe that money was limited, but then I saw my parents take my sister shopping for clothes or electronics. Once, I overheard my mother on the phone with a family acquaintance. She responded, "He's fine. He doesn't need much. She's the one we have to focus on. She's more sensitive." I think that's how they perceived me. someone who did not need assistance or attention. But I did. I've just learned not to anticipate it. By sophomore year, I had started looking for ways to make my own money. I'd shovel snow, mow the grass, and walk the dogs. It wasn't a lot, but it gave me some control. If I desired a book or a game, I'd buy it for myself. My parents thought it was responsible, and they expressed their pride in my independence. They didn't realize it was because I had no other options. Meanwhile, my sister kept getting what she asked for. If she wanted to join a new club, they would pay. If she wanted to quit something, they'd say that was fine. She, too, enjoyed showing off. She'd tell me, "Mom and Dad said I'm special." I'd dismiss it, but it stuck. One last thing from that period. There was a career expo at the school. I wanted to go since some tech businesses were coming. It was a Saturday event. I asked my father for a ride. He stated he was busy driving my sister to a friend's party. My mother told me to just ride the bus. I went anyway, but the bus route was sluggish, so I missed the first part. When I went home, my sister was telling me how much fun she had at the party, and my parents were beaming as they listened. I didn't even mention the fare. By the time of high school, I had ceased expecting them to be present for anything important to me. I kept my head down, worked when I could, and intended to leave as soon as possible. By the time I graduated high school, I realized I couldn't rely on my parents for anything. They had covered part of my essential education fees, but anything else I required came out of my own wallet. My sister had just turned 17 and already owned a used automobile that my parents had purchased for her. I asked if I might borrow it for prom, but the answer was no since she might need it. I ended up taking a ride from a friend. It didn't concern me much at the time. I'd learned that I needed to manage things on my own. I was accepted into a decent state college, nothing spectacular, but solid, and it was in another city, which was significant for me. I desired space. My parents made a big fuss about how they couldn't afford much help and that I needed to be responsible. I was offered financial aid and a tiny scholarship. They paid for my second semester's books, but I covered the rest, including lodging, food, and transportation, with a combination of part-time employment and savings from mowing lawns and doing odd jobs in high school. My sister received a large good luck supper when she began community college later. When I departed for school, it was only a quick goodbye. The first year was difficult, but I learned a lot. I worked evenings at a coffee shop close to campus. On weekends, I took shifts in a bookshop. My grades were consistent, but I was unable to attend as many parties or hang out as some of my classmates. I did not mind. It was fantastic to know that I earned what I had. I had a strict budget. I kept a notebook with every expense, even to the smallest snack. When I wanted a new phone or a better laptop, I planned months in advance. I rapidly discovered that if money is not tracked, it evaporates quickly. Meanwhile, my sister remained the focus of my parents' attention. She transferred programs twice before deciding school wasn't for her. She lived at home without paying rent. They purchased her a modern car because the previous one was unreliable. I found out about it when my mother called to ask for help setting up the Bluetooth. It did not surprise me. During family dinners, she would whine about being bored or wishing to travel. My parents would nod and say, "We'll figure something out." When I stated that I was taking 16 classes and working 30 hours a week, they'd just respond, "You've always been good at managing things." My sophomore year, I got a better job. One of my professors assisted me in obtaining an employment as an assistant at a small technology business in downtown. It paid more than the coffee business, and the owner did not mind my class schedule. I kept the bookstore shifts on weekends. Most days, I left my apartment at 8 a.m. I came back after dark, but my savings grew. I created my first genuine bank account and began contributing to a tiny emergency fund. I recall sitting at my tiny desk, proud of the $600 I had managed to keep unspoiled. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. The absence of support from my family no longer bothered me. It became normal. I rarely called home, save for birthdays and holidays. My parents would inquire how school was doing, then discuss my sister's current plans. She worked at a shop for a month before quitting because she disliked the hours. My mother told me she just needed to find her passion. I was tempted to mention that I didn't much enjoy working double shifts, but I kept quiet. By junior year, I had streamlined everything. I moved into a cheaper apartment with 2 roommates, sold my old bike, and used the money I had saved to buy a second-hand automobile. It was not fancy, but it was dependable. Every dime counts. I found freelancing employment online, simple data input, coaching, or anything that pays. I also began reading about investment. Nothing major, just fundamentals like saving, budgeting, and compound interest. I didn't have much, but I enjoyed the thought of being prepared. My parents organized a lavish celebration for my sister's 19th birthday. She received a new laptop and a week-long trip to the coast with her pals, which they paid for. I wrote her a simple note that read, "Happy birthday, no party for me when I turn 21. I celebrated by working a shift and getting takeout with a friend. It did not hurt. It was simply the way things were. My parents set various standards for us. They always have. I just made sure to stay focused. By the time I was about to graduate, I'd saved enough for a deposit on an apartment and had paid off my tiny student debts. I didn't immediately notify my parents since I didn't want to hear comparisons or comments. When I mentioned it during a phone call, my father responded, "Good, now maybe you can help your sister when she needs it." That line resonated with me. It was not intended as a joke. They actually saw me as her backup plan. That was when I resolved that whatever I made would be for myself. I would not let their priorities influence mine. Well, after graduation, I remained in the same place where I attended school. The computer company where I worked part-time offered me a full-time position. It wasn't a lot of money, but for a 23-year-old just out of college, it was adequate. I moved into a better apartment with one roommate, kept my car running, and began saving money each month. I had a plan. Continue to work hard, save money, and eventually buy my own place. At home, nothing has changed. My sister, at 21, was still living with my parents. She did not return to school after dropping out of community college. She worked a few short-term jobs, quit when she didn't like the hours, and complained about not receiving enough help. My parents treated her as if she were under siege. Every time I called, the conversation always revolved around her. "Your sister is figuring things out. She's stressed. Be nice to her. She's sensitive." Around this time, the rudeness became more noticeable. When I visited for the holidays, she treated me as if I were a visitor in her home. She'd leave her belongings everywhere, make disparaging remarks about my clothing or automobile. "Wow, you're still driving that old thing. Do you even have time to live your life working all the time?" If I ignored her, she would press, "Why are you so quiet? Are you too good for us right now?" One Thanksgiving, I brought a little basket of food and drinks. Nothing spectacular, just something to give. She rolled her eyes and said, "Thanks, but Mom already covered everything. You really don't have to show off." My parents didn't say anything to her. My father actually told me, "Don't be offended. She jokes like that." When she started seeing a guy, things got worse. She bragged about how supportive he was and how they were going to do great things. At one dinner, she made a point of mentioning, "He doesn't just work all the time like some people." My mother chuckled. My father said, "She just wants you to loosen up." I kept my distance, but I recognized the trend. They minimized all of my wonderful work. Whatever she accomplished, they exaggerated. Around that time, I received my first promotion. My manager summoned me to his office and offered me a team lead role. I was proud of it. I planned a modest dinner with close friends and sent invitations to my parents and sister. They said they will attempt to arrive. The day arrived. I reserved a good site. Nothing fancy, but I wanted to celebrate. Everyone but my family showed up. I called my mother thereafter. She corrected herself. "Oh, sorry, your sister got a new certification and we went out with her. It was some online class certificate, nothing career-changing, but they acted like it was a major milestone." My dad interrupted, "You know how she gets." We were unable to reject it. That night, I realized I had stopped expecting them to show up for me. Despite the home drama, work was satisfying. I kept moving higher, saving more, and looked for methods to advance. I learned to avoid unnecessary expenses. I started reading more about money, investments, and property. My weekends were spent relaxing, meeting friends, and checking listings. My long-term goal was straightforward. I want to own my own apartment before I turn 31. My parents' calls remained the same. If they contacted me, it was typically about my sister. "Could you help her with her resume? She needs help with a loan. She's thinking of launching a business. Perhaps you can guide her." If I stated I was busy, they would become cold. My mother once told me, "Don't forget where you came from." I didn't dispute. I just continued doing my own thing. During one visit home, I eventually confronted them. My sister had been moaning about her employment, claiming she deserved more money. My mother turned to me and said, "Maybe you can talk to your boss about hiring her." I responded, "She doesn't have the experience. I worked for this." My father scowled and said, "Don't be selfish. Family helps family." My sister smirked. "You act like you're some big deal. It's just a job." That night, I drove back to my apartment and made a choice. I would never let them decide what I owed. I was not harsh about it. I simply stopped disclosing details. I didn't tell them how much I earned, where I invested, or what I had planned. When they inquired, I kept things short. It wasn't fury, but rather strategy. By the age of 26, my financial situation had improved beyond my expectations. I had a healthy bank account, a dependable automobile, and no debt. My sister was still living at home. She had a newer automobile, which my parents helped her buy, and they paid for some of her costs. She'd make online comments about her independence, but I knew the truth. She eventually totaled the automobile. When my parents reminded me that I should keep an eye out for her, I simply nodded. I was not going to argue. I had bigger plans and did not need their approval. Every snide remark and overlooked moment only made it clearer. They were not going to change, and neither was I. By the time I was 27, I had established a good routine. Work was consistent, and my savings finally looked like something. I kept my spending modest and said no to many things. My buddies called me stingy, but I knew what I was doing. I wanted to own something before turning 31. I began to look seriously at places. I spent my weekends researching listings, meeting agents, and crunching numbers. I wasn't looking for anything extravagant, just a tidy, stable apartment in a good location. After months of searching, I discovered it. 3 bedrooms, plenty of light, and near to work. The price was reasonable, and I could afford the down payment. Signing those papers felt like crossing the finish line. I did not inform my family right away. I waited until I held the keys in my hand. Then I sent a group text featuring a snapshot of myself in front of the building. Finally, I have my own place. It took a bit, but here we are. The responses were predictable. My mother answered, "Congrats. When are you having us over?" My father wrote, "Good job. Your sister will want to see it too." My sister responded, "Finally, it took you long enough." I invited them to a weekend lunch. I prepared, kept things basic, and gave them a tour. My mom instantly commented on how light and open it was and how ideal it would be for a young family. My father inquired about the 3rd bedroom, guest room, and office. My sister interrupted before I could respond. "It's obviously wasted space. Imagine a crib in there." I cracked a joke. "Good thing I bought it for me, not for you to play dollhouse." She rolled her eyes. "You don't even have anyone. It's just you. Kind of selfish to keep a whole place like this to yourself." My father gave me a look as if I should ignore it. I did not. "Yeah, I worked 3 jobs and skipped vacations so I could selfishly buy something with my own money. Shocking, right?" My mother shifted the subject, but I recognized the tone. They were impressed, but it seemed like they couldn't give me full credit. They inquired about furniture costs, and then my father added, "Well, at least it's in a good spot, easy to sell when you upgrade. Maybe your sister can use it if she needs something short term." I laughed again. "Yes, if she has market rent and a signed lease." They didn't like that. My mother responded, "You're so sarcastic. We're just saying families help each other." Exactly. I helped myself because no one else was offering. They fell silent after that. Lunch was fine, but the comments continued. My sister would send texts like, "When I get my own place, it's going to be bigger." Or, "Nice apartment. Could use more color though." I would just give a thumbs up or say, "Great. Let me know when that happens." Months later, during another family dinner, things flared up again. My sister was discussing how pricey everything were. She complained about rent and gas, saying, "It must be nice to have a free place." I replied, "It is not free." "Banks enjoy receiving monthly payments," my father interjected. "She just means you don't have to worry about moving. It's easier for you." "Yeah," I replied. My sister glared. "It's easier when you plan ahead and don't quit every job you get." "You think you're better because you bought a box with windows?" I asked. "Better than complaining about a box I don't own." My mother urged us to stop. "You two are always at each other's throats. Your sister is just stressed." "She's always stressed," I explained. "Maybe that's why you keep paying for her stuff." My father exclaimed sharply, "Enough. We help her because she needs it." "Right," I said, "and I managed because no one helped me. Got it." The room fell silent. My sister said something about my being selfish. I just stated that if being selfish implies not relying on your parents at the age of 25, you are guilty. Despite the anxiety, I did not ask them for anything. I did not bring up my finances. I stayed focused on my job. Everything was going nicely. Meanwhile, my sister remained adrift. She worked a series of temporary jobs and blogged online about how difficult the economy was. Every time I went home, my parents talked about her plans and lofty dreams, and they rarely asked about mine. I didn't care anymore. I was confident in my ability. However, the clues did not cease. My mother would suggest, when you settle down, maybe your sister could stay at your place for a while. My father quipped, "Hope you got a spare key." My sister giggled, "Yeah, you should keep it clean for when I need it." I gave the same response each time. Not happening. I worked for it. One night, my father called unexpectedly. My sister needed somewhere to stay after a split. He asked if she may stay at my place for a few weeks. I said, "No, she's your sister." He said, "She's also an adult." I responded, "She's got 2 parents and a bus pass. She'll be fine." He didn't like that. "You've changed." "No," I replied. "I just stopped being the backup plan." I could feel the sting, but I didn't feel guilty. I was clear from the beginning. What I built was mine. They had several years to treat me like family. They chose to treat me as if I were a support staff member. Now I was only returning the same energy. Months later, I had everything running just as I intended. Work was steady. I had savings. My space was properly decorated and felt like mine. My sister, meantime, remained at home. She had 3 jobs and a brief relationship that ended horribly. My parents continued to treat her as if she were frail, whereas I was the responsible one. Then came the family BBQ. It was late July. Everyone was present. Parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. I arrived with some drinks and sides. My sister arrived last, arms around her lover. The entire family surrounded her as if she were the guest of honor. 2/3 of the way through, she stood up with a wide smile. "I have news," she announced, raising her glass. "We're having a baby." Everyone shouted, hugged her, and congratulated her lover. I approached her and said, "Congrats, I hope you're ready for no sleep." She smirked. "Well, I'll have a lot of help, right?" I didn't give it much thought. Then the night went on. Then my aunt inquired, "So, are you still planning a wedding?" My sister replied, "Yes, but the timeline is complicated now." She turned to me and smiled overly warmly. "Actually, this is the perfect time to bring this up. I've been thinking about your apartment. It would be the perfect place for us. Close to everything. Plenty of space for the baby." I was nearly laughing, thinking it was a prank. "Good thing I bought it for myself, not for a lease." She scowled. "I am serious. We can't stay with Mom and Dad forever. I need a safe haven, and you have that second room you don't even use." "You're correct," I answered. "It's for my office and my stuff. It's crazy how people use rooms in their own homes." She rolled her eyes. "Come on, you don't even have a family. It's just you. This would really help me out." "I worked 3 jobs for years to get it. Maybe you could try that method." My mom got involved. "She's asking because she needs it. You're single. You can wait a little while to get another one." She was staring at me. "Wait, you want me to hand over the place I bought because she's pregnant?" My dad responded, "She's starting a family. That's more important right now. You'll understand when you have kids." I shake my head. So all those years I was on my own, working, paying rent, saving, none of that counted. But she gets pregnant, and suddenly my work belongs to her. My sister's arms are crossed. "Don't make it a big deal. You can rent somewhere else for a year or 3. We'll take good care of your place." I laughed. "Yeah, because you're famous for taking good care of things like that job you quit after 4 weeks or the car you totaled." "Wow," she remarked with a loud voice. "So, you're going to hold that over me forever? I thought family helped each other." "They do," I informed you. "When it's a 3-way street, not when it's a 1-way handout." My mother's expression stiffened. "You always have to bring up the past. She's asking for help during a hard time." "Hard time?" was all I responded. "They made a decision. I did not sign anything. I am not their safety net." My father's voice increased. "Don't talk like that. She's your sister. Show some respect." I got up. Respect works both ways. Respect my work, money, and home. The table fell silent. My sister started crying. "You're so selfish. You've always been like this. It's just one thing and you can't do it for me." "One thing? You've had everything since you were a kid. The parties, the car, the attention. I got lectures. Now you want my place?" She grew furious. "Fine, keep your stupid apartment. Don't expect us at your next big moment. We won't bother." "Trust me," I told you. "I stopped expecting you years ago." My mother murmured something about my being cold. My father shook his head as if I were a disappointment. I scooped up my belongings. "I came here to eat a burger, not to be shamed for owning something. I'll see you around." On my way out, my sister called after me. "You're going to regret this when you're alone." I turned and answered, "Better alone than broke and bitter." That was the last time I attempted to be polite about it. The texts began arriving the next day. My father wrote, "She cried all night. I hope you're happy." My mother said, "We raised you better than this." My sister sent a wall of texts about how I wrecked her pregnant pleasure. I did not respond. 3 days later, my sister called to say, "Fine, I don't want it anymore, but you could at least give us money to get a place." I chuckled. "You want me to pay you because I said no to giving you my home? That's creative." She left a message. Following that, the family group chat became sour. My parents acted distant. They implied that I had become haughty. I didn't care. I had a job, savings, and my own space. I had worked for it. I was not going to give it up because someone else couldn't handle theirs. Following the gathering, I decided to draw a hard line. I didn't react to any additional guilt texts. My sister remained angry. My parents were cold. At first, I believed everything would calm down. Instead, they doubled down. They started telling family about how selfish I was. A cousin messaged me, "What's going on? Your mom said you wouldn't let your sister stay with you." I once said, "I bought my own home after years of working. They think it's theirs," which is not the case. Most of my cousins agreed with me. Some people commented, "Yeah, your parents have always babied her." That was lovely to hear, but I didn't need it. Work was my secure place. I put in more hours, took on tasks, and was noticed. A few months later, my manager contacted me about another promotion. It came with a raise and increased flexibility. I decided to celebrate, but this time, I did not invite my parents or sister. I hosted a little celebration with friends and a few supportive relatives. Everyone else sent their congratulations. My parents did not even text. My sister made a comment online about families forgetting who important, which I ignored. Then things changed. My parents began hinting at financial issues. I learned from my cousin that they were covering several of my sister's expenditures. She left another job throughout her pregnancy because it was too stressful. They were paying a portion of her rent, auto insurance, and hospital bills. My father even tapped into his retirement savings. I kept out of it. Every time I received a cryptic text like, "Your sister's having a hard time," I answered, "Hope she figures it out." A month before the baby was due, my mother called me for the first time in weeks. She inquired, "Could you just loan your sister a little, just until things settle?" Responded, "You mean give her money so she doesn't have to manage her own life for 3 months?" She responded, "You've changed. You used to care." I responded, "I learned who cared about me. It wasn't you." She left a message. The baby arrived. Everyone acted as if it were a royal occasion. I sent a tiny gift with a brief message. "Congrats. Hope the baby's healthy." My sister said, "Wow, that's it." I left it on read. As the months passed, it became evident that things were not going smoothly for them. The boyfriend had inconsistent work. The bills piled up. They moved in with my parents. When money became tight, the wedding preparations fell through. I learned this from my aunt, who told me, "Your parents are stressed. Your father is covering everything." I just said, "They made their decisions." I was not gloating. It was only a fact. Then came the moment that decided it for me. My father called again, his tone milder. He remarked, "We may have been too harsh on you. We didn't realize how much you did on your own." He asked if I could contribute a modest amount each month until they were back on their feet. I nearly laughed. So, after years of hearing, "You're fine, you can handle it," I'm now meant to carry you? No thanks. He stated it was family. I replied, "Exactly. Family supports, not drains. I learned that from you." That concluded the call. The real satisfaction arrived later. My company hosted a large end-of-year function. They recognized certain staff for significant contributions. I was one of them. My photo was displayed on a screen, and my name was mentioned in front of the entire company and some local media. They awarded me a substantial bonus. I shared one photo online of myself beaming with the trophy. I did not tag anyone. The comments poured in. Friends, co-workers, former classmates. My sister didn't say anything. My mother liked the post but never commented. My dad remained silent. When I saw them at a Christmas dinner months later, the vibe was different. They were nice and quieter than normal. My sister rarely spoke to me. My father inquired about work in a neutral tone. My mother talked largely about the baby. Nobody mentioned the apartment. Nobody asked for money. It was as if they already knew the answer. My sister whispered, "You must feel pretty proud." I responded, "Not proud, just glad I stopped waiting for anyone's approval." My father shook his head slightly, but did not disagree. My mother hugged me swiftly and murmured, "Drive safe." That was it. Looking back, I don't believe I ever received the apology I deserved. But I have something better: distance, control, and proof that I can construct anything without them. The child who was instructed to understand while his sister had all the attention grew into a guy who did not require their attention at all. They are still the same folks. She is still entitled. They are still enabling. But none of this matters anymore. I've got my place, my job, and my peace. When I lock my door at night, I recall that every piece of furniture, every payment paid, and every inch of that apartment were the result of my own efforts. My relatives shut me out for 8 years. Then they lined up at my mansion, begging for help. I let them in, gave the tour, and finally kicked them out. If you've ever been regarded as the family's cautionary tale, only to have those same people circle back the moment you achieve, you'll understand why last Sunday morning altered everything. I was in my garage working on a custom motorbike build when my Ring doorbell rang. Sunday morning, 9 a.m., and there's a line of folks on my front porch. At first, I assumed it was a religious gathering or something, but as I checked the app, my blood ran cold. 7 members of my family stood there as if they owned the area, having said no more than 2 words to me in the previous decade. My grandmother Margaret, Aunt Laura, Uncle Daniel, cousins Jason and Lucas, and older brother Leonard were with a blonde I'd never seen before. I'm Albert, 35, and seeing these folks on my land was like finding rodents in your kitchen. For reference, my house is not a typical suburban design. It's a 4,500 square foot custom home on 5 acres outside Austin, replete with a 4-car garage, workshop, and enough space that I can't see my neighbors. The kind of place that cost me 7 figures yet was completely worth it. My first instinct was to disregard them. These were the same individuals who had excluded me from family events for a decade because I chose to create my own construction company rather than follow their safe corporate career path. But something about their body language, the way they were all gathered together and appeared nervous, piqued my curiosity. The security cameras had seen them arriving in 2 vehicles, Leonard's beat-up Honda Civic, which had seen better days, and what appeared to be a rental car, which Uncle Daniel would most likely have to pay for somehow. They'd been standing there for about 5 minutes before ringing the bell, apparently gathering up their nerve. I watched them whisper amongst themselves while using the app. Grandmother Margaret adjusted her handbag several times as if she were prepared for fight. To understand why this visit was so memorable, consider how we arrived. Growing up in a working-class family in Houston, I was the odd one out. My father, Charles, was a shift supervisor at a chemical facility. My mother, Helen, worked part-time in a dentist clinic. They were wonderful people, but they had a limited definition of success: college, corporate job, suburbs, retirement with a pension. My brother Leonard was their golden boy. Straight A's, football team captain, full scholarship to the University of Texas for business. I, on the other hand, was the kid who disassembled lawnmowers in the garage and made tree houses that looked like they came from a magazine. While Leonard studied for finals, I learned welding on YouTube and built unique furniture in shop class. The treatment we received was completely different. When Leonard returned home with his report card, it was time to celebrate. Dinner at his favorite restaurant, calling relatives to gloat about his accomplishments. When I brought home something I'd made in the woodshop, a jewelry box for my mother's birthday that took me 3 weeks to complete, the reaction was always the same. "That's great, honey. Did you complete your algebra homework?" Every Sunday, we would go to Grandmother Margaret's place for dinner. She dominated the family with an iron fist, and her favorite topic was comparing the grandchildren to one another. Leonard was always a success story. My cousins, Jason and Lucas, were figuring out their paths, which included messing around in community college while I was the creative one, code for future disappointment. The hierarchy was established early and has never changed. Leonard had a wonderful seat at supper next to Grandmother Margaret, where he could tell everyone about his academic accomplishments. Even when I was 16 and 17, I was always wedged in between younger cousins at the kids' end of the table. The entire extended family had an obsession with appearances. Aunt Laura married Uncle Daniel, who worked in middle management at an insurance company, and they pretended he was some sort of business magnate. They lived in a decent suburban home and drove leased cars that they couldn't afford. They did, however, contribute to its success. Their social media posts were meticulously designed to include fancy dinners, vacation images, and modest boasts about promotions and raises. I was 17 years old when the cracks appeared. Leonard was finishing his sophomore year at UT, getting high grades and dating someone our parents adored. Meanwhile, I was getting in problems at school. Not for anything horrible, just for missing school and working construction jobs under the table. As a high school student, I earned more money working weekends than most people in our family made in a month. I wasn't earning simply pocket change. I was earning $800 to $1,000 per weekend doing framing, concrete pours, and finishing carpentry. By senior year, I had saved $15,000, more than my parents had in their emergency fund. Instead of being proud, they felt humiliated. When neighbors inquired about my weekend occupations, my mother would swiftly divert the subject or make excuses about me helping a family member. When I told my parents I wasn't going to college, it was as if I had joined a gang. The conflicts were spectacular. Dad threatened to kick me out. Mom cried, calling me selfish and ungrateful. But the family's reaction was far worse. At Leonard's graduation party, Grandmother Margaret stopped me beside the BBQ pit and said, "Albert, this construction phase needs to stop. You are embarrassing the family. Leonard has a real future. You're simply playing with tools." That chat lasted 20 minutes, and she went over all the ways I was disappointing the family. She brought up my cousin Aaron, who had attended community college and now works at a bank. She highlighted family friends whose children are pursuing respectable jobs in education and nursing. She even likened me to my neighbor's son, who had enlisted in the military. At least it was respectable service rather than hard labor. That's when I realized I was done trying to fit within their small box. I moved out the next week, got a job with Ramirez Construction, and began studying the company from the ground up. While Leonard partied his way through his final 2 years of college, I studied every element of the construction industry. My first flat was a studio above a garage, which I rented from one of my crew members. It wasn't much, 400 square feet with a hot plate and a little fridge, but it was mine. I outfitted it with items I made myself and felt more at ease there than I had in my childhood bedroom. The family's attitude became evident rather quickly. At family gatherings, they'd ask Leonard about his internships and employment prospects with real curiosity. When they spoke to me, they asked polite questions about my handy work and suggested that I return to school for something more secure. The condescension was subtle but consistent. Uncle Daniel would pat me on the shoulder and say things like, "Well, somebody's got to do the physical work, right?" Aunt Laura would ask whether I was still doing construction, as if it was a pastime I'd ultimately grow out of. Cousins Jason and Lucas, who were barely passing their community college classes, would joke that I was the family's hired muscle. I reached my breaking point at the age of 23. My brother Leonard had secured a mid-level accounting job at $45,000 per year, which the family treated as if he had won the lottery. Meanwhile, I've recently founded Rodriguez Construction with 2 of my crew members, armed with a $25,000 loan on my truck and all of my cash. Starting my own business was not a whim. I'd been with Ramirez Construction for 5 years, where I learned everything there was to know about bidding, project management, permits, and supplier relationships. My supervisor was grooming me to take over, but I was too impatient to start something on my own. Those first several months were terrifying, sleeping on invoices, hoping clients would pay on time, handling everything from accounting to cleaning up myself. But we were seeing results. Our first significant project was remodeling a 1920s home, and the before and after images spread around town. At Christmas dinner, I made the terrible mistake of attempting to share my success. I'd just gotten a $380,000 custom home contract, my biggest project yet. When I brought it up, hoping for some family support, the reaction was nasty. "That's nice, Albert." Aunt Laura spoke, scarcely looking up from her phone. "What happens if the construction market crashes?" "Leonard has job security," Uncle Daniel said, nodding. "Construction is boom and bust, kid. You should think about getting your real estate license or something more reliable." What followed was a masterclass in backhanded compliments and worry trolling. They questioned my company concept, inquired about my insurance coverage, and claimed I was risky. Meanwhile, Leonard sat there smiling as everyone applauded his wise professional decision. But Grandmother Margaret dealt the fatal blow. "Albert, playing contractor is okay for now, but when are you going to settle down and get serious? Leonard has even mentioned buying a house with Emily. You're still living in that flat, working with your hands like a laborer." The word laborer was spoken in the same tone as criminal. At that point, I recognized these individuals would never respect what I achieved, no matter how successful I became. The irony was thick. Leonard's steady position paid less than I was earning working for someone else, and my new firm was on schedule to make $400,000 in its first year. I departed early that night and did not look back. The last straw came at Leonard's engagement party. By then, my company was generating $600,000 per year, and I was earning approximately $180,000. I volunteered to help with the costs. The response: "Thanks, but we've got it covered. Maybe just bring a nice gift." At the party, I sat with family acquaintances I'd never met before, while Leonard's college colleagues sat at the main family table. Leonard thanked everyone who had supported him throughout his speech, including his boss, professors, and even school buddies. 8 minutes of appreciation to everyone who had influenced his life, and I wasn't worth a single line. That's when I stopped trying. If they wanted to pretend I did not exist, I would make it simple for them. The following 5 years were the most focused of my life. Rodriguez Construction grew from 3 people driving a truck to 20 full-time employees with equipment worth more than most people's homes. I specialized in high-end custom builds and commercial projects, the type for which clients do not inquire about price because they understand that quality costs money. By 28, I was earning in the mid-6 figures per year, but I kept it quiet, drove the same F-250 work truck, lived in a decent apartment, and reinvested money in the firm. My family had no idea what I was doing. When I came into extended family around town, they'd inquire how the construction was going with the same dismissive tone. Meanwhile, Leonard's suburban fantasy was collapsing. Word spreads in small circles. He had a large home, auto bills, credit card debt, and an expensive wife with no income. Around 2018, Austin had a significant real estate boom, and my life changed dramatically. Suddenly, every successful business owner desired custom homes, and they all preferred the builder who built quality without sacrificing corners. In 6 months, I got 3 contracts totaling more than $2 million. These weren't your typical projects: a 6,000-foot modern farmhouse for a software entrepreneur, a historic downtown building conversion, and a custom workshop for a rare automobile collector. Each assignment challenged my abilities while also fostering relationships with clients who became repeat customers and referral sources. That's when I purchased 5 acres of hill country and began planning my own home. Not to brag, but because I wanted to create something that would last. The design process took months. A historic appearance with all modern conveniences meant to last generations. Custom millwork, imported tiling, and commercial-grade everything. The garage was organized like a professional shop. The office overlooked my own man-made lake. By 2020, I was worth millions on paper. Rodriguez Construction was booked solid for 18 months. I had employees earning more than most college grads. But to my family, I was still just Albert, who worked in construction. The loneliness did not worry me. I'd made lasting friendships with other company owners, artisans, and customers. Real relationships are built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. When my crew needed assistance, we all looked out for one another. My electrician's house flooded, so we spent the weekend reconstructing his basement for free. I dated but never went serious, especially after witnessing Leonard's marriage fall apart when Emily left him for a lawyer amid his firm's downsizing. I had other things to do than play such games. They say that living well is the best form of payback. While my family was confined in their suburban bubble, defining success based on appearances and social position, I was creating something tangible. Every morning, I wake up on my own property, in a home I designed and built, surrounded by work that will outlast me. And you know what? It took them 3 years to realize I was gone. When CO struck, construction was deemed necessary. So, while everyone else was on lockdown, I was busier than ever. People who remained at home desired improvements, expansions, and custom offices. I established a second crew and began working on commercial projects for firms to adjust to the new reality. The pandemic provided chances I had not anticipated. Restaurants needed outdoor seating created rapidly. Office buildings needed to be modified for spacing. Families that worked from home desired dedicated office spaces, home gyms, and outside recreation areas. My company pivoted faster than others because we were always adaptive. While large construction companies were bogged down in paperwork and change orders, we could bid on a project on Monday and begin work on Wednesday. Clients were willing to pay a premium for that kind of attentiveness. By 2021, I was generating several $million in annual revenue and earning a substantial personal income. I bought a new truck, some investment buildings, and began considering extending into Dallas and San Antonio. The investment properties were a strategic decision. I purchased distressed properties in good neighborhoods, renovated them with my own crews during slow periods, and either sold them or maintained them as rentals. It was a logical extension of my building experience, and it provided a variety of income streams that were not entirely based on new construction projects. When Cousin Jason's girlfriend spotted my truck at a petrol station, she recognized me. She followed me on a social media platform that I rarely used, but that included a few photographs of my work. Next thing I know, family members are looking through my posts, seeing photographs of my house, my equipment, and the high-end projects I was uploading. My account was mostly a business tool, before and after photographs of projects, shots of the staff at work, and the occasional image of a finished place. However, someone who knew me saw it as a clear picture of success. The projects were clearly high-end. The equipment was of the highest quality, and the work was undeniably good. After years of stillness, I started receiving strange texts. "Hey, Albert, hope you're doing well. Saw your post about that mansion you built. Looks incredible. We should catch up soon." The communications were clearly false. Jason, who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years, suddenly wanted to get coffee and catch up. Lucas made a buddy request after avoiding me since high school. Aunt Laura even began appreciating my business posts, which was ironic given that she had spent years warning everyone that I was squandering my life. I disregarded them all. If they wanted to reconnect because they learned I had money, that told me everything I needed to know about their motives. But I had no idea they were preparing an ambush. Steel-toed boots echoed through the entryway as I walked to the front door. When I opened it, the expressions on their faces were wonderful. They were expecting the family failure they had been discussing for years. Instead, they got a 6'2" guy in shape, dressed in a good flannel and jeans that fit. "Albert," Grandmother Margaret said first, her voice trying to sound pleasant but coming over stiff. "What a beautiful home you have." "Yeah, well, hard work pays off," I said, not bothering to hide the sharpness in my voice. The quiet stretched on like a bad first date, until Aunt Laura stepped forward with a phony smile. "We were in town for the Johnson family reunion. Do you remember the Johnsons? We thought we'd stop by because we heard you lived out here." The casual mention almost made me laugh. These people hadn't cared where I lived for 10 years, and now they were acting like we were close. The Johnsons lived 2 hours away, so this wasn't exactly a casual stop by. "How thoughtful," I said, my voice flat. "Do you want to come in, or are we having this conversation on the porch?" The entryway alone probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Custom wrought iron chandelier, imported stone flooring with radiant heating, solid walnut staircase with hand-forged railings. They filed past me into the foyer, and I watched their eyes widen. Vaulted ceilings, custom ironwork, original art on the walls. Cousin Jason couldn't contain himself. "Man, Albert, this place is great. What did this cost you?" "More than you make in 3 years," I replied without missing a beat. I gave them the full tour because I wanted to see their reactions. The living room with 20-foot ceilings and a custom stone fireplace, the kitchen with professional-grade appliances and a center island larger than most people's bedrooms, and the office, which was adorned with awards and photos from luxury projects. Jason kept making low whistles. Lucas was taking pictures for his girlfriend, which meant documenting everything for later sharing. Leonard's new wife was calculating property values in her head, but Grandmother Margaret's reaction told me the most. She was reevaluating everything she thought she knew about me, and the grandson she'd written off as a failure was clearly more successful than anyone else in the family. And the real reason reveals itself. We ended up in the living room with coffee and pastries, small talk about the weather, their drive out, safe topics that avoided the elephant in the room. I answered their questions about the house and business with just enough detail to make them understand the size of what I'd built. The living room was designed for entertaining, with a seating area that could comfortably accommodate 15 people. The fireplace was faced with stone I'd quarried from the property, and the mantel was a single piece of mesquite that I'd had milled and finished by hand. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided views of the lake and the landscaped grounds. Aunt Laura cleared her throat, signaling that we were approaching the true purpose of their visit. "Albert, we've been thinking about family lately," she began, using that delicate voice that made my skin crawl. "Leonard's going through some financial difficulties with the divorce settlement and legal fees." The setup was there, and I kept my expression neutral while waiting for the pitch. "Legal fees?" I asked, playing dumb. Leonard looked uncomfortable, but Laura pressed on. "The custody struggle with Emily has been costly. She hired one of those high-end divorce attorneys, and you know how complicated these things can be." Emily was seeking alimony, claiming she had sacrificed her career to support Leonard's advancement, despite the fact that she had never had a career to sacrifice. I had been hearing about Leonard's divorce from mutual acquaintances for months, so I knew how messy things could get. Uncle Daniel jumped in. "Actually, Albert, I've been researching investment prospects in the building industry. With your knowledge and connections, we could certainly put together something profitable for the entire family." I had to give them credit for inventiveness. Rather than asking for money directly, they framed it as a business opportunity and family support, but I could read between the lines. Leonard needed money, and they decided that his successful brother should provide it. The investment opportunity angle was especially insulting, as these people who had never shown interest in my business when it was struggling were now eager to become partners now that it was successful. They wanted to bypass the years of long days, financial risk, and developing relationships with suppliers and clients. Grandmother Margaret made what she felt was the final argument. "We've missed having you at family gatherings, Albert. It's time to put the past behind us and start acting like a family again. After all, family looks out for one another. After 10 years of treating me as an embarrassment, they were now ready to welcome me back into the family, as long as I brought my checkbook." I leaned back in my leather chair and studied their faces, remembering how they had written me off when I was struggling to build something from nothing. Now that I had exceeded their expectations, they wanted to be family again. "That's fascinating," I responded calmly. "Remind me, when was the last family event I was invited to?" The stillness was deafening, and they all looked at each other, hoping someone else would respond. "Well," Laura finally responded, "you know how it is with busy schedules and everything." "No," I said, "I'm not sure how it is. Why aren't you telling me?" They'd come here expecting the old Albert, the one who desperately needed their acceptance and would do anything to belong, but they were about to learn that version of me existed in the past. Leonard finally found his voice. "Albert, I know we haven't been as close as we should have been." "Close?" I interrupted. "I haven't received a phone call, text message, birthday card, or holiday present from anyone in this room in over 8 years. You got married twice and did not tell me." My grandmother told people that I was a construction worker who would never amount to anything. "And now you want to discuss getting close?" Their cheeks paled as the comfy fantasy they'd been living with, that our separation was somehow mutual, was shattered by realities they couldn't refute. Jason attempted to play peacemaker. "Hey man, maybe we all could have done better at staying in touch." "Remaining in touch?" I stood up, my full height, making them all look up at me. "Let me tell you about remaining in touch. When I first started my business, I called Dad to tell him about my first major contract. Are you aware of what he said? 'That's nice, son. Leonard was recently promoted to senior accountant.' When I bought this land and began building, I sent Mom pictures because I was proud of what I had accomplished. She presented them to people and said that I was still playing with tools. The room was dead silent, and the clock in the corner appeared to have stopped ticking. When Leonard got engaged the first time, I said, I offered to help pay for the wedding. Laura here informed me that they have it covered, but thanks anyhow. At the reception, I was seated with strangers, while Leonard's pals sat at the family table. When he gave his speech thanking everyone who had helped him achieve, he included his teachers, his boss, and even his friends, but not his brother, who had offered to assist. Leonard looked down at his hands. Albert, I'm not done, I said, my voice firmer. When grandmother Margaret underwent heart surgery 5 years ago, I drove to the hospital with flowers and promises to pay her medical fees. The nurse informed me that visits were only for direct family members. When I mentioned that I was her grandson, Laura here told the staff that I was simply distant family and that I should wait. The nurse was perplexed because I clearly knew family details, but Laura insisted I wait until after the immediate family had visited, so I ended up spending 4 hours in the hospital cafeteria waiting for permission to see my own grandmother. I had driven hours after receiving word about grandmother's surgery, bringing flowers and a card with a check to help with expenses, and instead of being welcomed, I was turned away like a stranger. When I finally got 5 minutes with her, she was groggy and barely acknowledged my presence. I left the check with Laura, who never mentioned whether grandmother even knew about it. Grandmother Margaret's face was white as a sheet. The reality of how they treated me was laid out in detail, and there was no way to spin it. So, no, I responded, settling back down. We haven't been as close as we should have been. You completely shut me out of this family, and now that you know I am more successful than all of you together, you want to be family again. That is not family. That is a transaction. Leonard's wife, who had been quiet, decided to speak out. Look, Albert, she said, standing up with a confident tilt to her chin. I'm not sure what occurred between you guys in the past, and frankly, I don't care. What I care about is that Leonard has been struggling financially since his divorce, but you clearly have more money than you know what to do with. Family helps family, period. I mean, look at this place. She motioned around the room. You're definitely loaded. Leonard is your brother, and he needs help. It's not like you earned it all on your own. You were fortunate to secure several construction contracts during the boom. The least you could do is support the family that reared you. I stared at her for a long time, contemplating the utter boldness of what she had just said, before breaking into a deep, real chuckle that made everyone in the room shift. What makes it so funny? She questioned, her cheeks burning. You, I murmured, wiping my eyes, are exactly what I was expecting. Leonard always had a type. Pretty, entitled, and entirely oblivious of how the real world operates. Albert, Grandmother Margaret snapped. I ignored her and concentrated on the blonde. What's your name again? Vanessa, she said, lifting her chin. Brittany, can you tell me what you do for work? I'm a social media influencer, she explained. Of course she was. How many followers? 12,000 on one platform, 8,000 on another. I nodded sincerely. And how much money does that generate monthly? Her confidence dipped slightly. Well, it's building up. So, nothing. You make nothing. I looked to Leonard. Brother, you divorced one rich digger and married another. That is either extremely awful luck or lousy judgment. Leonard's cheeks turned hot. Don't talk to my wife that way. Your wife just told me I should give you my money because family helps family, while admitting she has no idea or cares about our history. She referred to my accomplishment as luck and stated that I had not worked hard for it. But I'm the bad guy since I pointed out that she's a social media influencer with no salary instructing me how to spend my money. Vanessa crossed her arms. I'm just saying, if I had millions and my family needed help, you'd do what? I interrupted. You'd give it away to people who treated you like garbage for 10 years? Vanessa, tell me how much money you've given Leonard since you married him. That's different. What is the difference? You married him knowing he was struggling financially after his divorce. What have you done to help solve such problems besides telling others to pay? The quiet was deafening. Vanessa had no response because there was none, but she was not finished. Do you know what your problem is, Albert? You are selfish. You have a lot of money and are hoarding it instead of assisting your family. Leonard told me you were close when you were youngsters. Did Leonard tell you we used to be close? I looked at my brother. Is that the tale you've been telling people? That we grew up together yet eventually drifted apart? Leonard could not meet my gaze. Albert, we were close when we were kids. We weren't close, Leonard. You were the golden boy who did everything correctly, and I was the letdown who took the wrong way. That has been the dynamic since day one, and you never did anything to change this. Even when we were youngsters, you agreed with everyone else and treated me as if I were somehow inferior to you. The figures don't lie. I took out my phone and scanned through my contacts. Vanessa, you said I was lucky with building projects. Allow me to show you what luck looks like. I opened my banking app and pointed the screen to them. This is my business account. Current balance is in the millions. That's only the checking account. Does not include investments, retirement funds, or property values. Their eyes widened as they looked at the number on the screen. I spent a lot of money to build this house. I paid with cash. The workshop is outfitted with equipment worth hundreds of thousands. The trucks outside, the F-350 dually, were quite expensive. When I complete restoring the old car, it will be worth 6 figures. And that is just the toys. My investing portfolio is excellent. I have numerous rental homes with substantial equity. Last year, my company achieved multi-million-dollar revenue, and I personally earned a significant income after taxes. And the silence was tremendous. They knew I was succeeding, but witnessing the actual extent stunned them. So when you say I got lucky, Vanessa, you mean that I worked long hours for 15 years, established a reputation for quality that demanded a premium price, and made prudent financial choices. But, fine, we'll call it luck. Leonard stared at his hands as he delivered the final truth bomb. Albert, I had no idea. I have no idea what? Was your brother successful? That I had accomplished something substantial while you were playing office politics and getting taken to the cleaners. I've attempted to tell you about my success for years. You just weren't listening. I returned to the window and looked out at my land. You know what the saddest part is? I would have discussed anything with family members who genuinely cared for me. When I was building this house, I had visions of hosting family cookouts, having nieces and nephews visit for the summer, and being the successful uncle who helped with school funding. Turning back to face them, I said, but that needed having a family who recognized me as more than a disappointment. Instead, I developed relationships with people who valued what I was creating. I assisted my foreman in purchasing his own home, my office manager. I'm paying for her daughter's schooling. My concrete crew leader, I co-signed his company loan when the bank refused to approve him. Grandmother Margaret dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Albert, we made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed briefly. Grandmother, you told people you were embarrassed to have a grandson who worked with his hands like an ordinary laborer. Laura informed her neighbors that I was the family failure who would never amount to anything. Leonard didn't even ask me to his first wedding, so I took out my phone again. You want to know about mistakes? Let me show you what you truly lost. I scrolled through my photos and found the ones I was looking for. This is the children's hospital wing I donated to build last year. It's named after our great-grandfather who worked in construction his entire life to support his family. Their faces turned pale as they comprehended the ramifications. This is the scholarship fund I established at the community college each year for students who wish to learn a skill rather than go to four-year colleges. And this, I showed them another photo, is the shelter I helped build and furnish. I provided all labor and supplies. I was especially proud of the hospital's children's wing, which had been operating in a converted basement for years with poor lighting and outdated equipment. My donation helped fund a complete renovation that included child-friendly design, natural lighting, and a place for families to stay during treatment. Every year, I selected students who wanted to learn a craft but couldn't afford the necessary tools and materials. The scholarship covered everything, including tuition, books, tools, work boots, and safety equipment, and some of my winners now work full-time for my company. Aunt Laura was in tears now. Albert, we didn't know. You had no idea since you had never asked. You were too busy looking down at me to realize what I was actually doing. I placed my phone away and looked at each of them individually. But here's the point. I did not perform those things to gain notoriety or to prove anything to you. I did them because it was the correct thing to do. Lucas, who had been quiet, eventually spoke up. Albert, is there any way we can make this right? I understand we messed up, but family should mean something. I watched his expression for a long time. He appeared to realize the gravity of what they'd done more than anyone else. Lucas, family means something. It entails being there for one another during good times and bad. It entails praising each other's accomplishments without jealousy. It means having each other's backs when the world attempts to tear you down. I paused, letting that sink in. Tell me, when did any of you ever do that for me? He couldn't respond because the answer was never. Do you want to know what family means to me now? When the flood struck East Texas last month, I took 6 of my employees and 4 vehicles to assist with cleanup and repairs. We worked for free for 2 weeks to help people restore their homes. Those people are now my family. We support each other because we want to, not because we share DNA. We helped over 50 families get back on their feet by clearing debris, tarping roofs, and assisting families in salvaging what they could from flood-damaged homes. My crew volunteered their time, and I covered all of the expenses, including fuel, equipment, meals, and hotel rooms. I walked up to the front door and opened it wide. That's what family looks like. Now go out of my house! Leonard came to a halt and turned around as they passed me, each looking defeated and humiliated. Albert, I know I don't deserve it, but if you ever change your mind about giving us another chance... I looked at my brother, really looked at him, the golden kid who had had everything handed to him and squandered it through stupid judgments and bad taste in companions, the man who had stood by while his family treated me like nothing for a decade. Leonard, do you want another chance? Here's what it looks like. You solve your own problems without seeking assistance from others. You demonstrate your ability to be self-sufficient. Most importantly, you learn to treat people with dignity rather than viewing them as either useful or disposable. He gave a slow nod, his eyes wet. What if I do all that? Then maybe we can talk about being brothers. But not until then. As they drove away, I stood in my doorway, watching their taillights vanish down my private road. For the first time in 10 years, I felt fully free of their expectations and judgments. My phone vibrated with a text from my foreman. Boss, we have a poker game tonight. Are you in? I smiled and replied back, absolutely. Family supper, correct? You know it, boss. I secured the door and walked back to my garage, where the Chevelle was waiting. Some things are worth preserving, while others are better left in the past.